What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I'm going to continue to examine 100 years of the greatest 150 black fighters of all times. I want to show you a fighter. What a real fighter looks like. I want to take a look at his career, what he's done with the time in which he came, the opportunities that he didn't have versus the opportunities that he did have, the men that he was in there with, what he had to deal with, and still accomplish what he's accomplished. Man's name is Sam Langford. He was known as Boston Bone Crusher, Boston Terror, Boston Tar Baby. He was known as Black Tar Baby, Black Tarzan, Black Boy. Take a look at those names and digest them for one moment. Take a look at when this man came in existence. What was happening around him at that time when those names were given to him. Now, Sam Langford was born March 4th, 1886 in Wearmouth Falls, Digby County, Nova Scotia in Canada. He died January 12th, 1956 in Cambridge, Middlesex County in Massachusetts. Let's stop right there for one moment. Sam Langford left his home in Canada at the age of 14. He wanted to get it away from the abuse in his household. He wanted to get away from his father, who was abusing him. 14 years old, he left another country on his own to get here. And he wound up in Boston, Massachusetts. Now, Sam Langford stood 5'6" and 3/4 inches. Some would say 5'7" inches. His best weights were 142 to 180 pounds. He started as featherweight. And he would win the Boston Featherweight Championship title. He would fight between 1903 and 1926. Within that time, he would have 500 fights. Now, you're going to find in the record books 252, some would say 256, some would say 266. The man fought over 500 fights. Jack Blackburn would tell you he fought 400 times. George Dixon fought over 1,000 fights. You see, what has happened was that boxing was illegal, especially in certain states. And it was nothing to get two men into the backwoods, get them to fight each other, collect the money, and everybody goes their separate ways. Sam Langford was in a lot of those fights. He was in a lot of no decision fights, no contest fights. No decision fights where you had the press. Everyone had a different outcome. A lot of records of Sam Langford has been lost. A lot of records were just not counted in record books. A lot of his fights. And it's a shame because there's a lot of experiences that Sam Langford has been through, just not recorded. And the same happened with the Barbados Demon, Joe Walcott. Same happened with Jack Johnson. Same happened with Joe Gans. Same happened with George Dixon. George Dixon was in 2 fight to the death matches, several battle royale fights. But getting back to Sam Langford, he was introduced into the Ring Boxing Hall of Fame, the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame. He won a Boston Featherweight Championship belt. It's actually a cup. He won a colored middleweight championship title. He won a colored heavyweight championship title 5 times. The black championship title once as a claimant when he would defeat Dixie Kid and Klondike Haynes, 1909. He would win the Australian heavyweight championship belt when he would defeat Sam McVeigh. He would win a light heavyweight championship title. He would win the Mexican heavyweight championship title. Now, he wound up in a gym at the age of 15. It was called the Lennox Athletic Gym. And the manager there was Joe Woodman. Sam would get a job as a janitor there. And it was one evening when it was a young man who was shadowboxing in the ring, was waiting for a sparring partner to show up. And Sam was sweeping around the gym, but he would always pay attention to the fighters at the ringside. And one day this young man had called over to Sam Langford and asked him would he mind sparring for a couple rounds. And Sam was just taken back of not fighting the man or sparring with him. But what would happen to him had he been seen sparring with the man? So he would get the equipment on him and he would take it easy on the man for the first half of the round. Because he didn't know what would happen if he was, let alone seen fighting, but even hurt the man. And Sam had all that rage in him from the abuse that he would suffer from his household, particularly his father. And he would take it out on this man and he would knock him out in one round. Sam Woodman was coming into the gym at that time and he couldn't believe what he'd seen. And Joe Woodman was looking for a meal ticket to begin with. And Sam Langford would now become his meal ticket. He knew he had a star at that point. And between 1903 and 1926 would be the career of Sam Langford. And Sam Langford was very underrated as a fighter. There seems to be a confusion and disconnect of Sam Langford's career. What he had to go through, what he had to deal with, and the time in which he came. For instance, between April 3rd, 1903 and April 16th, 1903, he would draw one, win one with Stonewall Allen. Stonewall Allen was a hell of a fighter. Would also have a fight with Jamaica King. Between December 8, 1903 and September 5, 1904, his second year as a professional, he would defeat lightweight champion Joe Gans. 15 rounds, non-title fight. Now take a Joe Gans, the night before, would face Dave Holly in Philadelphia. He would have to travel 300 miles to Boston to meet with Sam Langford. And that shows the testament of Joe Gans. But all in all, Joe Walcott would defeat Joe Gans, who was the lightweight champion at that time, current champion. 15 rounds would be for a non-title affair. Between December 23rd, 1903, Sam Langford would take on Jack Blackburn. Fought him 6 times, 4 no decisions, 1 win and 1 no contest. Between April 11th, 1904 and February 13th, 1905, he would lose 1, have 2 draws and 1 win with Philadelphia Dave Holly. He would take on Jeff Clark, the Joplin Ghost, as well as Jack Blackburn. And in 1904, he would challenge the Barbados Demon, the current welterweight champion, Joe Walcott. He would have a 15-round draw with Joe Walcott. That title was not on the line. They wasn't taking a chance with Sam Langford. But with the Barbados Demon, Joe Walcott, same thing happened with Joe Gans. 15 rounds, draw. It was Sam Langford. May 26, 1905, November 12, 1907. He had 4 wins, 1 no decision, 1 loss with young Peter Jackson. April 26, 1906. He would lose 15 rounds for the colored heavyweight championship belt against Jack Johnson. But when he fought Jack Johnson, it was in contingency of getting a second opportunity when Jack Johnson became champion, if that would be the case. And Sam Langford would never get that opportunity, as promised to him. So between September 25th, 1907 and April 14th, 1910, he would have 7 fights with Jim Barry, 7 wins and 2 draws. They would have a total of 12 fights combined. Between December 25th, 1905 and September 14th, 1917, he would have 14 fights, 2 draws, 5 no decisions, 4 wins, and 3 losses with Joe Jeanette. Joe Jeanette had over 100 street fights before he even turned professional. He was a knockout artist. And Sam Langford was in the ring with him 14 times. Between May 1st, 1914 and January 17th, 1927, he would fight Harry Wills 22 times, 10 no decisions, 2 wins, and 6 losses. Between April 1st, 1911 and August 14th, 1920, he would have 15 fights with Sam McVeigh, 4 draws, 5 no decisions, 1 loss. And he would defeat Sam McVeigh for the Australian Heavyweight Championship belt. Now, the thing with Sam Langford, he fought them all. He was in the ring with George Godfrey, the Leaperville Shadow. He was in the ring with Stanley Ketchel. He was in the ring with Jamaica Kid. He would have several fights with the Joplin Ghost. He would have several fights with Blackfoot Simmons, who was known as Kid Monday. He would be in the ring with Larry Temple. He'd be in the ring with Kid Williams. In 1906 alone, he would face Larry Temple, Blackfoot Simmons, Joe Jeanette, Jack Johnson, Young Peter Jackson, George Gunther. He would have fights with all those men in 1 year alone. He'd be in the ring in 1905 with Joe Reed, George Gunther, Belfield Walcott, Dave Holly, George Cole, George Gunther, Young Peter Jackson several times, Larry Temple, Blackburn, and Joe Jeanette. 1916 was probably his best year. He was in it with Harry Wills twice, Sam McVeigh, Cleve Hawkins, Dave Mills, Jeff Clark. Fought Sam McVeigh like 3 times and Harry Wills like 5 times. 1918, he'd be in there with Jeff Clark, the Joplin Ghost, about 4 separate occasions. Harry Wills twice. Jack Thompson. Big Boy Butler. You see, when you look at resumes like that, he was consistent. He fought the very best that was in his way. He fought them several times. He fought in different weight divisions. Sam Langford, when you look at it from that perspective, was the greatest fighter of all times. Now, you may look at it where there are other fighters that might have fought better with the opponents in the time in which they came. But what for boxing is, no one beat Sam Langford because he fought in all weight divisions. He fought everyone that was in his path. He called out the twin Sullivan brothers, Mike and Jack. He called out Jack Dempsey. He called out Gene Tunney. He called out Tommy Burns. He called out Jack Root. He called out George Gardner. He called out Gene Tunney. He called them all out. They didn't answer the call. Imagine if they accepted his challenge, whether they defeated him or not. Names he would have had on his resume. That's a fighter. So I just wanted to remind everyone watching this series. The expectations of these black fighters that will be listed in the time in which they came. We can't control the opponents that are in front of them in their era. We can't control the politics of it. We can't control the demands. We can't control the negotiations to the point where these guys don't negotiate themselves out of a contract, because half of these guys are doing that every day. Now, the thing with Sam Langford, and what I want to get across to everyone watching these videos, when you look at a lot of the fighters that are fighting around today, you take their whole resume, you'll put that resume in one of the years of Sam Langford. The quality of the men that some of the guys are fighting today, their best wins, which is probably 3 or 4 or 5, Sam Langford fought them guys in 1 month. All of them. So the standards are very high with Sam Langford. And Curtis and I are not looking for those standards across the board. What we are asking for is for the challenges that the men would accept during their era. What they did with those challenges. What was their accomplishments? How consistent they were. That's what we're looking for when you're putting a list together like this. Because you have to be fair to the fighters who did. So once again, Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel.